is considering not paying furloughed workers back pay when this government shutdown is over, according to a memo first reported by Axios, which President Trump was asked about in the Oval Office earlier today. Take a listen.
The Democrats have put a lot of people in great risk and jeopardy, but it really depends on who you're talking about. But for the most part, we're going to take care of our people. There are some people that really don't deserve to be taken care of, and we'll take care of them in a different way. I follow the law, and what the law says is correct, and I follow the law.
Here now is the Republican chairman of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman James Comer of the great Commonwealth of Kentucky. Thanks for joining us. Here's what your Speaker Johnson, said about this earlier today. Oh, he said there are some legal analysts who are saying that may not be appropriate or necessary in terms of the law requiring that back pay be provided. So I'm sure there will be a lot of discussion about that. If it's true, that should turn up the urgency and the necessity of the Democrats doing the right thing here. Both you and Speaker Johnson, of course, voted for, in 2019, requiring retroactive pay for federal employees impacted by a shutdown. What's your position now on withholding back pay?
Well, I think the government employees who are working throughout the shutdown should certainly be paid. And I think the law is probably pretty clear that they're supposed to be paid even during the shutdown. So hopefully everyone will get paid. I'm hopeful that Chuck Schumer will come around and go along with what we've always done when we get to this point where we, pass the continuing resolution to keep the government open and keep the government funded. I think that if you look at history, I've always said on conservative networks when Republicans and right-wing people were calling for a government shutdown, I said it never ends well because if you think you're going to save money, you're not, because you're going to have to go back and pay all these salaries. And I think Republicans have traditionally shut the government down to try to save money, and that didn't work. Now we have a situation where, in my opinion, Jake, the Democrats are shutting the government down because they want to spend more money. Right. We'll see what happens there. But I think the employees will get paid.
I want to turn to the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, which the Oversight Committee is doing. Yesterday, CNN's Caitlin Collins asked President Trump if he would consider a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell. This is after the U.S. Supreme Court denied to hear her request for an appeal. Here's some of what President Trump had to say.
I haven't heard the name in so long. I can say this, that I'd have to take a look at it. I would have to take a look. I'd have to ask DOJ. I didn't know they rejected it. I didn't know she was even asking for it, frankly.
Obviously, she's been convicted for sex trafficking minors. What do you think? Should President Trump consider pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell?
I do not think he should. I've been very vocal about that. I've seen enough information thus far from the thousands of pages of documents that the Department of Justice has turned over, in addition to the documents that we subpoenaed from the estate, in addition to conversations that I've had with some of the victims of Epstein and Maxwell, that I can say with confidence I would strongly discourage any type of pardon or commutation of Maxwell.
On the indictment against former FBI Director James Comey, as you know, one U.S. attorney resigned or was forced to resign after he told officials in his office in the Eastern District of Virginia that there was not sufficient evidence to bring charges against Comey. ABC News is now reporting that John Durham, the former special counsel who spent nearly 4 years looking into the malfeasance related to Crossfire Hurricane, he apparently told the Eastern District of Virginia that he was unable to uncover sufficient evidence that would support charges of lying to Congress against Comey. We all saw President Trump sending a message on Truth Social telling Pam Bondi to go after James Comey. Do you have any concerns at all that this is a political prosecution?
Absolutely not. This is where I probably disagree with you, Jake. I've seen enough on Comey that I think that he deserves a day in court. I believe that there's been sufficient evidence that has emerged that would show potential wrongdoing. Obviously, Comey deserves due process, as does anyone else. But as far as political retribution, I don't view it as retribution. I view it as accountability. And I think that Comey has been a part of a team of bureaucrats in Washington that have weaponized the judicial system, that have weaponized the intelligence agency. So I think that this should be prosecuted, and obviously he deserves his day in court and he deserves due process. But I